Like the transition from step 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, there isn't really a clear stop and start either, but rather just kind of a slide. So let's jump back to the powerful tool of putting your rationalized mantras on tape in the sound of your own voice. So now I know some of you are thinking, oh my God, I hate the sound of my voice. And if you are, good, then you're like most people. Unless you've had lots of opportunities to hear yourself on tape, you probably do not like the sound of your own voice on tape. But did you ever stop to think that you hear your voice every day coming out of your mouth? And it doesn't seem to bother you that way, does it? That's because of two factors. When we speak, we feel the vibration of our vocal cords. This makes up a significant part of the sensation of talking and listening. And when that vibration isn't there, it just sounds weird. And that, coupled with the fact that when the sound leaves our mouth, it has to bounce off something to get back to our ears, it doesn't sound the same when it comes straight from a device. And our brains detect the difference and declare that as just plain weird. Now, the interesting thing is that after a certain number of attempts at listening to your own voice, usually less than 50, the brain just consolidates the two and the weirdness just vanishes. And if it still bothers you after 50, well, get over it already. It's a powerful tool. Are you going to leave it on the table just because it feels a little weird at first? Don't be that guy or that girl. I could get into a whole other discussion about that here, but I won't. Just pull the trigger and do it. I have never had a client wish they hadn't tried it. I can assure you of that. And here's another little fun fact. You don't even have to believe the rational mantra that you're hearing. In fact, you might not believe it at all. That happens all the time. People will tell me, man, it feels like I'm just bullshitting myself. Of course it does. When we hear something that doesn't match the belief that's already there in our brain automatically kicks it out, at least sometimes, as just a bunch of BS. But don't let that stop you. Please don't let that stop you. What's happening is that your prefrontal lobe, up here, where most of the logic is formed, is trying to keep your current beliefs intact. More on that later. But the temporal lobe, the powerhouse on both sides, two lobes, is busy funneling that new information into the subconscious. So even if it feels like BS, the brain is still picking up the rationalized mantra and putting it to good use, literally changing things without the prefrontal lobe knowing what's happening. We're sneaking it right past the gatekeeper. And if there's any doubt about that, I can prove it in 2 words: television commercials. How many times have you said, that commercial is so stupid? Come on, I know you have. Do you think the advertiser cares that you're thinking that? Not a chance. While your prefrontal lobe is busy declaring the commercial stupid, your temporal lobe is picking up the important message that's always contained in the skit. They know what they're doing. This process that I'm showing you is simply taking a page from their playbook. You simply cannot afford to leave this most powerful tool on the table, especially not when the limbic system is involved, which is definitely the case here. The limbic system is the part of the brain that houses anxiety and stress and fear. Most accurately, the limbic system is responsible for seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. Pandemics, like this one, put that system on high alert. And when that happens, our thinking can get quite irrational quite quickly. Now, I could get into a whole other discussion about why worst-case scenarios abound, but let's just chalk that up to our desire to survive at this point. More on that later. What is pertinent here is that the limbic system gets out of the gate faster and stronger, and that is by design. This little fact keeps us alive more often than it doesn't keep us alive. This means that our limbic systems get a big head start. The cerebral system, on the other hand, is much slower. But although slower, it has a ton more resources, and it's huge by way of comparison. So this process is all about leverage, leveraging every possible resource in the cerebral part of the brain, think the rational part, to catch up to and overtake the limbic system, think the irrational part. We absolutely need all the leverage we can get. In the human brain, repetition is the most precious commodity. Each time we repeat a neural process, a thought, a belief, in this case, listening to a rational mantra and thinking along, we create new connections. These connections are called synapses, tiny biological microswitches that transmit and store information. Even if it's the exact same thought you've thought before, the brain still creates thousands of new switches to reinforce that thought. We call this learning. And on top of that, each time a circuit is fired, the brain secretes myelin, a substance that acts as insulation to these circuits. And if you know anything about physics or electricity, insulation reduces resistance. So each firing adds just a bit more size and a bit more insulation, making the circuit stronger and faster. And the more regions of the brain that can be recruited in the effort, the faster the new mantra is learned in the brain. This is really no different than learning to play, say, a musical instrument. You can't learn by just using logic. You have to practice every day. So the final step here is practice. Every day, multiple times per day. How often? And for how long, you might ask? Until the new mantra is learned, whatever it takes. But to give you an estimate, I find for myself and for my clients that about 100 trips through, listening 100 times over the course of at least 30 days straight seems to be about that magic point. It's the point at which someone notices something different. I describe it myself as just this subtle thing that sort of sneaks up on you, and all of a sudden you notice you're thinking differently. The new mantra has become kind of your new normal. Now, some of my clients have described it as a more pronounced realization, like it feels like someone has pushed play and the tape has started in my head. It's a pretty cool feeling to all of a sudden realize that you are reacting very differently to things that used to freak you out. Now, hear me very clear on this. You are not done after 30 days or 100 trips through. Do not stop. I repeat, do not stop. 100 times through is when you notice the change, not when you're done with the change. I have had more clients than I can count come back to me after they've stopped treatment, feeling so good about their change when they were done with treatment. And now, later, 6 months, a year, whatever, sheepishly, they have to admit that they quit listening to their tapes. Don't be that guy. Don't make that mistake. So there you have it. The 4 steps of CAVP, Cognitive Audio Visual Programming, my proprietary blend of cognitive strategies. Now, the process itself involves watching these tapes, taking notes, and trying the steps. And that's where the coaching comes in. It always sounds good on paper, or in this case, on tape, but once you try to apply it to your own life and your own situation, you'll find it's much harder than it looks. The brain doesn't give up its secrets all that easily. It is not so easy to see that what you're thinking might be irrational. Sometimes it's very obvious, but not all the time. After all, that's the way we think, right? Kind of hard to spot irrational thinking when you have an irrational belief, right? And even when you can spot it, coming up with the rational response can often be elusive. Remember, and I know that this is redundant, but it bears repeating, this is not about trying to think happy thoughts thoughts about sunshine and rainbows. This is about constructing rational thoughts to fit the irrational ones that are there in a very specific and mutually exclusive way. That's probably where you'll need the most coaching, at least at first. So I know this is a lot to drink in, but you really only have two choices. Bring in the biggest guns, or just go home and keep your anxiety. So, are you with me? One final thought. Notice I keep using the term mantras. This really is meditation, folks, plain and simple. These tapes are meditative gems, guided imagery on steroids. I like to think of them that way. I myself have 30 minutes worth of tapes that I listen to every single day. It will change your life. So there you go. The most expedited crash course in cognitive strategies that I've ever put together. I'll tell you that for sure. And in record time. So thank you again for excusing my blunders and the relative monotony of looking at my mug for so long with nothing else to look at. Normally, I try to dress up my videos with pictures and captions, but I really don't have time for that right now. So, if you've made it this far, then the next step is up to you. Get going, and then text or email me the minute you hit a snag or have a question. I will ask you to agree to the consent, so you will want to wander over to the PVC tab on my website and at least watch tape 5 on the consent. Then click on the link on the right-hand margin to read that consent, and then just text me or email me to let me know that you agree. Finally, this is the bulk of the information that I want to share. The bones of what I think you need to get going. I wanted to get as much out here as quickly as I could, but I don't plan on being done with my taping. As I think of more things to add, I will keep putting additional tapes on the site, on this page, so keep checking back for the latest. Ultimately, I would really like to create a database or library, if you will, of all of the irrational thoughts that are connected to this crazy virus and how to rationalize them. Now, as I stated from the outset, this effort is absolutely free of charge. I'm donating my vacation and an additional 10 hours a week and any additional time that I'm pretty sure I'm going to have on my hands here in the next couple weeks at least. Since this hit super hard last week, the inquiries that I usually get have literally dried up. And I guess that would happen. You know, even in a time of crisis where anxiety is super high, people are more worried about food and rent, as they should be, I suppose, than paying for counseling. I totally get that, especially when no one really knows when this will be over. So here's the deal. I'm donating my vacation, and I'll donate at least 10 hours per week until this is over, guaranteed, and probably more as my client load drops off and until the economy gets rolling again. But I'm not one to sit around and do nothing. So if I have more hours, I'll donate more time. But I would like your help on a couple of things. Please spread the word. I'm hoping to reach as many people as I possibly can, and even perhaps get some other counselors to follow suit. Secondly, please remember those who can't pay a dime. Those lovely waitresses and waiters, for example, that bring so much fun and joy to our lives when we're out to dinner, they're out of a paycheck. I want to make sure I can reach them. So please make sure to let them know that this is completely free for anyone who is struggling. And thirdly, if you do have a few extra dollars, if you're not that person who's completely out, please pay a little bit forward by donating what you can. And you can do that right on my payment tab using the miscellaneous button. That way the next person in line can benefit as well. Believe me, I'm not trying to make any money here, but that will help me reach more people who are really in a financial world of hurt right now. And remember, we're all in this together. So, are you with me? Good. Let's go put the hurt on anxiety for a change.